In this lesson, we'll cover using linked CAD files and learn how to set up the architectural floor plans. So in a previous lesson, we looked at creating a basic Revit project and linking in several of our 2D CAD files. For example, the 2D CAD files could be independent floor plans that other people are working on. They also could be elevations. And the Revit file would host all of those by linking them in, and we can align them correctly, floor plan to the correct level, and elevations to the correct side of the actual buildings. So in this lesson, we'll cover bringing in or linking in those floor plans and assigning them to the correct level. So the first thing we want to do is we would want to create levels. I can see I already have two levels created in the lower left. If I look under Base Plans, under Floor Plans, I have Level 1 and Level 2. Make sure Level 1 is actually current because we're going to insert or link in our first CAD file and place it on Level 1. Now, if you had additional levels, what I would do is go to an elevation view and add multiple levels for as many as you need, depending upon how many floors of CAD files you'd be bringing in. So with Level 1 active, let's go to the Insert menu, and on the Insert menu, click Link CAD. Revit will then ask you to go out and find a CAD file. Now in this case, we're using a DWG file. But you can see on the drop-down for files of type, you can bring in other formats, DXF, SAT, and if you're using SketchUp files, you can bring in the SketchUp file as well. But again, we're going to use a DWG. Now, where these files are located are in Chapter 5. So browse to your C drive, Learning Revit Structure 2015, and then to Chapter 5, or wherever else you copied these files from the DVD. Now, the one we want to use here is going to be the Level 1 floor plan. Again, this is just a basic 2D CAD file that was done in a 2D CAD tool. And I can see a pictorial of it in the upper right. Now, as far as the settings go on the bottom, let's verify that these are set. Set colors to black and white. We're going to bring in all the layers and levels in the actual CAD file. We're going to leave import units to auto detect, meaning Revit will look at the CAD file and interpret the correct unit to use. Or you could set it if you knew what it was. Positioning, we're going to leave auto center to center for this example. Sometimes you'll want to use origin to origin though, dependent upon the actual file. And we want to place this at Level 1. We want to orient the view so that as I'm looking at this CAD file, up is actually north. So it will align that way in our Revit file. Also, make sure correct lines that are slightly off axis is uncheckmarked. Last step, click Open. This will import in that 2D CAD file, and we can right-click and do Zoom to Fit, and you can see it's our 2D file imported. Now, once we import this in, if you wanted to see it in 3D, I can click the default 3D icon, the little house on the quick bar at the top, and that'll show me that this is actually a 2D flat file brought in sitting at Level 1. Go ahead and close the 3D view to go back to the 2D view. Now, really at this point, if you were going to start building your actual Revit model using this as an underlay, we would start by adding grids, and then our columns, and then our walls. So just to show an example of this, if I wanted to start drawing my grids, well, we already have grids from the CAD file, so we could use those as a guideline to where to place our grids. So to create a grid, this is an architectural feature. Let's go to the Architecture tab. All the way to the right on the Datum panel, click Grid. Now, when you draw a grid, you can actually start by just clicking one point and then another point for the length of the grid, and then the bubble appears on one end, the other end, or both ends. But since we already have grid lines here, then they're of a certain length from the CAD file, we're just going to use those as a guideline. So in the Draw panel on the right, instead of selecting Line, you're going to select the option to the right that reads Pick Lines. Revit's going to ask, now pick some lines that you want to turn into or make from grid lines. Now the numbering for grid lines by default starts at number 1 and then counts up sequentially. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So if we zoom in a little bit to look at our actual numbering, you can see the vertical lines are going to be the ones we start with because they're numbered. Now notice though, there's 1, 1.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth going up. But again, the numbers count sequentially. So when you do this step, actually skip 1.1 or any dot number, and you'll come back and get those at the end, or you'll be changing a lot of numbers manually. So now let's do these. So to start, just move over the grid line 1 and left click. You can see it adds a new bubble and adds the number 1. Go over 2, click, over the line for 3, click, over 4, 5, 6, and you kind of see what I'm doing, and just keep going all the way to the very end, 9, and then 10. Now, after you've done 10, let's go back to where we skipped over 1.1, and now click on 1.1. But you notice it's 11, which is fine. But now while I'm still in the command, click on the number 11. And instead of 11, let's type in 1.1 and hit the Enter key. Now, the reason I had you do that last is because now Revit starts the numbering at 1.1. So if I click the next, it's going to be 1.2, 1.3, or 2.1, 3.1. And you can see that messes your numbering up. And it's going to cause you a lot more modification steps at the end. Now, with the numbers done, let's switch to the letters. And let's scroll to the top. And we're going to start with A. Now, go ahead and click on A, the line for A. Now notice it's 1.2, which is fine, but let's change it. Click on the 1.2 and type the letter A. Hit the Enter key. Now it's A. The lettering will go in alphabetic order, A, B, C, D, and so forth. So next we'll click the line for B, the line for C, the line for D, E, the line for F. Skip over F.1 for the same reason. Click G, H, the line for I, and lastly, the line for J. Now, let's go back up to the one we skipped, F.1, and click it. And notice it's K, but we're going to click on K and change this to F.1 and hit the Enter key and zoom back out. And once we're done with all the grid lines, click Modify. So by doing this, we actually created the grid lines right over top of the lines in the actual 2D CAD file. Now, we could have locked those together with the padlock so they stay bound. But let's say you eventually turn off the 2D CAD file so you visually don't see it. We have our grid lines. And really, you follow the same flow of adding walls, doors, windows by using this as an underlay. Now, the next step would be to go to level 2 and import in or link in our DWG file for level 2. So let's do that. In the project browser in the lower left under floor plans, double-click level 2. You can see level 1 is here as an underlayment. It's grayed out, and you can see our grid lines that we added. Now let's insert in the level 2 DWG file. Go to the Insert menu, link CAD, select Floor Plan Level 2, verify colors are black and white, all levels, auto detect units, uncheck mark the correct lines, positioning is center to center, place at is level 2. Make sure that's set. If you're on level 2, it should be automatically set. And orient to view. Again, that means looking at the view, up is north, and it'll align north in that direction in the Revit model. And click Open. What this will do then is actually bring in the level 2 DWG and place it at level 2 in the Revit model. Now, if it were off, let's say shifted to the right or the left, if it totally didn't align correctly, you could use your Align tool on the Modify tab by choosing first a grid line from level 1 that would be correct, and then secondly, you would select a grid line from level 2, which is incorrect, and then the level 2 DWG moves so it's right over top of the level 1 DWG. But in this instance, they both come in and they're totally aligned over top of each other. So then the next step would be to go on to level 3, level 4, or as many other levels or floor plans as you have that you wanted to bring in. To see again what we've done, you can go to the Insert tab, Manage Links, CAD Formats, and here are the 2 CAD files that we linked in. Click OK. So as a review, in this lesson, we talked about and looked at linking in CAD files, and specifically bringing in a 2D DWG file and aligning it to a level within Revit. After we brought the DWGs in and aligned them to the level, we used the lines in the DWG, specifically the grid lines, to create new Revit grid lines as an underlayment. We then went on to bring in additional floors of DWGs, aligning them to the appropriate level.